What if I told you that everything that you have ever taught to believe in life ever since you were born about meaning, structure, society, and even language itself is built on a very shaky foundation? Like, what if the truth isn't actually truth at all? Well, that's exactly what Jacques Derrida argued when he gave us one of the most mind-bending ideas in literary theory called as deconstruction. A lot of students face a difficulty in understanding what is deconstruction. I'm here to simplify it for you. So, shall we deconstruct it? First, let us understand who was Jacques Derrida, right? Derrida was a French philosopher and critic born in 1930. He is often linked with critical approaches like poststructuralism or postmodernism. He was highly inspired by writers and critics like Michel Foucault, Louis Althusser, Sartre, Nietzsche, even Saussure for that matter, and because of which he created certain works that challenged the traditional, established notions in philosophy, linguistics, and literature. These works basically include structure, sign, and play in the discourse of the human sciences. It includes speech and phenomena, writing and difference, and most importantly, of grammatology. All of these works, they basically demonstrated his concept of deconstruction. And before we talk about and break down what deconstruction is, understand that Derrida wasn't really interested in providing us or giving us clear answers. In fact, he was all about questioning the foundations on which we build our truths, on what we as a society consider truth to be. Now, before we begin discussing what deconstruction is according to Derrida, let us first understand the basic tenets that he provided in his essay Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of the Human Sciences, where everything sort of actually started. In this particular essay, he dropped a philosophical bomb. So what was this bomb? He starts by examining how Western thought has always been obsessed with structures. And when he says structures, he's also referring to this literary approach of structuralism, about the thinkers and critiques associated with it who looked at the world around them in the form of structures, who analyzed literature in the form of structures. Think of language, for instance. We all know that language has an inherent structure, and that inherent structure becomes its own fixed idea or fixed truth of language. For instance, think of a sentence in a language, right? We all know that a basic sentence will have a basic structure, which is subject, verb, and object. Now, this inherent structure will become the fixed truth of a language. How? If someone asks us that why is this structure like this, we are going to say that this is how is it, right? This is how it is. This is how it's been going, and this is it, right? In a way, we are attaching the truth to the language. We are saying that this is how it has been going on, so this is it, right? So that inherent structure becomes the truth of the language. But here comes the twist. Derrida says that this inherent structure, which sort of provides a center, right, that truth to language, for instance, it is an illusion, right? And here comes his key terms of absent presence. So what basically he meant by this? So basically, if you take the example of subject, verb, object, the basic structure of a sentence, which actually gives this idea of a fixed truth to a language. Now, what he meant when he said absent presence was the idea that language is itself arbitrary, which means that who created this rule about subject, verb, and object? It was a human, right, in the first place who created this rule, which means that this idea of a fixed truth of a language, of a fixed structure of a language, can be taken away anytime if we want to. because it was initially created by a human, right? So this idea of absent presence is basically talking about how this idea of a center which showcases itself to be present in language for itself in terms of the stability and structure that it holds, but it's also very absent, right? Because language is in itself arbitrary. It is created by humans. Then from that perspective, everything is destabilized. Because if the center can shift, the meaning itself will become unstable, right? If you take a look at the example that we were discussing right now of subject, verb, object, if that structure is completely nullified, if it is completely destroyed, then language itself will become unstable. How will you create words? How will you create sentences to make meaning? Right? So meaning is becoming unstable. This is what Derrida has called as the play of signifiers, where words are no longer pointing to a stable meaning. Go back to the concept of language being arbitrary, right? Why do we call a dog a dog? Why do we call a cat a cat? Because it was practiced by human communities for a very long period of time to associate the word with its meaning. So it is human generated, right? So once you understand that, it means that language in itself becomes unstable, meaning in itself becomes unstable, right? They are constantly changing, they are constantly in motion. So all of these ideas collectively led to the formation of the concept of deconstruction. So what exactly is deconstruction? Deconstruction is not a literary approach. It is not a literary theory. It is a way of reading texts, right? It is about how texts sort of contradict themselves. So when I say texts contradicting themselves, a best example could be understanding binary opposites. We talked about binary opposites when we were studying structuralism, right? What are those binary opposites? Good, evil, male, female, rational, irrational, right? So according to Derrida, when he talks about deconstruction, he says that you will generally find in movies and in novels wherein this binary is upheld, right? Like good versus evil, and there is always this triumph of good over evil. But then, according to Derrida's concept of deconstruction, these binary opposites will always remain unstable, right? Wherein sometimes you will feel that evil is ambiguous, right? That the evil person, the villain, did this because of so and so reason. So he may not actually be the villain, right? So once you try to break down things like that, once you try to see things in that particular manner, you are actually deconstructing, right? You're not ready to accept the structures that are provided to you right there in front of you. You're trying to deconstruct. You're trying to go beyond those binaries, right? That's exactly what deconstruction is. So we discussed binary opposites. Another important term related to deconstruction is différence. Différence is a combination of two words, difference plus deference. Difference, as we discussed in structuralism, how the word cat is different from the word dog, right? So a cat is a cat because it is not a dog. A dog is a dog because it is not a cow. So their meaning is established in relation with each other because they are different from each other, right? And what is deference? Deference means postponement. You are postponing the ultimate meaning. What does that mean? So if I ask you that what is the meaning of a dog? You're going to say it's an animal. Then I'll ask you what is an animal. Then you'll say that it is a four-legged mammal. What is a mammal? And so on and so forth. You're going to go on and on about defining a dog, but you will never reach that one ultimate meaning of a dog. And this is what Derrida has called as deference. You're eternally postponing the true meaning, and this is what he has also reflected in the way of reading. When you are reading a text, you will never arrive at one true meaning of a text. There is no one single meaning of a text which you can call as the truth or a fixed interpretation. Right? Since words are different from each other, you're going to continuously differ those words from each other to define them basically, but you're also going to continuously postpone it. And that's exactly what différance means. So basically, these are the concepts of deconstruction provided by Derrida. Seems complicated right now, but I am going to keep on making videos related to Derrida and deconstruction and breaking down deconstruction so that you are able to understand it in a better manner. Also understand that deconstruction emerged in the 1960s and 70s as a reaction to structuralism because of its scientific method of interpreting text and arriving at a true single meaning out of understanding the relationship between the structures. But then deconstruction went against all of these ideas. Right? So where structuralists like Saussure believed in stable structures and systems, Derrida came in and said, wait a second, these structures are built on shifting sands. Right? It is a part of what you can call as a post-structuralist turn in literary theory. Right? Now coming to the main part. How did deconstruction change the way we read literature? Before Derrida, critiques often tried to find that one single meaning, right, to unlock the meaning of a text as if there was this single hidden truth waiting to be discovered, right? But after deconstruction, critiques began to focus on ambiguity, right, to find out nuances in literary texts. So as I've talked about the ambiguous villains today, right, how sometimes their actions, they come from places wherein they were really hurt, and we try to understand them and we don't try to place them in complete black and white structures. That's ambiguity, and that is a result of deconstruction or a post-structuralist turn. Right? We try to challenge binary thinking, we try to highlight contradictions in your own logic, and most importantly, people started to read against the grain. What is said, what is not said, what is assumed, what is implied. All of these things, they sort of like helped the readers to read more, right? And to read very perceptively. For example, in Heart of Darkness, deconstruction would look at how Conrad critiques colonialism while still using colonial language. In Shakespeare's Othello, it could talk about how race and gender are framed through contradictory lenses, right? So in a way, you can say that deconstruction sort of like freed readers, right, where we were no longer bound by what author intended to say or, what the canon says or something along the lines of it. It opened up new ways of seeing literature, of reading literature as dynamic, unstable, living thing. So if you are preparing for your UGC NET English exam, you need to look out at terms like différance. You need to look at terms like definitely deconstruction, binary opposites, logocentrism, right? These are very important terms when it comes to Derrida as well as post-structuralism. But apart from UGC NET English, why does deconstruction still matter today? Because we are living in a world full of multiple meanings, conflicting narratives, hidden structures, right? Everywhere you look. Derrida gives us the tools to question what seems obvious, to look at texts and ask what's missing, what's assumed, and what's being silenced. Deconstruction isn't about tearing things down. It's about looking more closely at how they are built, right? So if you are preparing for your UGC NET English exam, make sure you understand not just the definition of deconstruction, but its spirit, the urge to question, to doubt, and to read deeply. And then accordingly, you need to make notes. If you found this video helpful on deconstruction and Derrida, informative and helpful, please like, share and subscribe to my channel for more such insights on literature and UGC NET English exam. And remember, in deconstruction, the end is never really the end.